I am Daniel Carter. I always thought my marriage was stable, even if it felt a little cold lately. I told myself it was just stress, maybe her health issues, nothing more. I said to myself, Emily is just tired. She will come back to normal. But lately she avoided my eyes. I noticed it, but I did not confront her. One rainy afternoon she told me she had a medical checkup downtown. I asked, "Do you want me to drive you?" She smiled quickly and said, "No, Daniel, I can go alone." My chest tightened, but I nodded. I said, "All right, call me when you arrive." She just said, "Sure," and left the house too fast. Later that day my manager called and said there was a power outage at work. I said, "Really? Then I will head home early." I drove through the rain, thinking nothing of it at first. I was just tired. Then I stopped near a coffee shop to answer a call. I remember holding my phone saying, "Hello?" And that is when I saw her. Emily. Through the glass window she was sitting with another man. I whispered, "No, that cannot be her." The man introduced himself in my mind as Ryan Brooks. They were holding hands across the table. I felt my heart stop. I kept saying, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there is another explanation. The rain started getting heavier. I stood outside, unable to move. Then I saw him lean forward and kiss her fingers. I froze completely. I whispered, "No. Emily, please no." My breathing broke as everything inside me collapsed. I could not understand what I was seeing. My eyes dropped to my wedding ring. I whispered, "This cannot be happening." I stood there in the rain, staring at it, feeling like my life was ending. I wanted to walk inside, but my legs would not move. I kept whispering to myself, "This is not real. This is not real." People passed by me under umbrellas, but I did not notice them. I just stood there watching her through the window. She laughed again and it cut through me like a blade. I said under my breath, "Emily, why?" I felt my throat tighten. I wanted answers, but I feared them more. I imagined walking in and asking, "Is this what you call a checkup?" But I stayed frozen. The rain soaked my clothes, but I did not care. I only cared about what I was seeing. I whispered, "She would never do this to me." But the truth was right in front of me. I turned my hand slightly, looking at the ring again. It felt heavier than ever before. I whispered, "Is this how it ends?" I saw her and Ryan stand up together. They looked so normal, like nothing was wrong. I felt sick. They walked closer to the exit. I knew I could not stay hidden much longer. I whispered, "Emily." But my voice broke. I stood there, rain hitting my face as everything I believed shattered. I could feel my chest burning, like I could not breathe properly. I kept thinking, how long has this been happening? I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I pressed my palm against the cold window glass. I saw her look away for a moment, but she did not see me. I whispered, "You chose him, over me." My hands started shaking. I stepped back slowly. The rain blurred everything in front of me. I kept staring at my wedding ring, unable to accept reality. I whispered again, "This marriage is already dead, isn't it?" I turned away from the window, my legs finally moving. I walked through the rain without knowing where I was going. Everything in my mind was screaming, but I stayed silent. I kept hearing her laugh again and again in my head. I said quietly, "I gave you everything. And you destroyed me." I looked down at my ring one last time. I slowly removed it from my finger. It slipped off easily, like my marriage had already let go of me. I held it in my palm, staring at it. I whispered, "Goodbye, Emily." I closed my fist around the ring. I turned away from the coffee shop for good. Behind me, my life was still inside that window. I walked into the rain alone. I finally understood that some moments do not just break hearts, they end entire worlds. Forever gone now. I return home before Emily does. I sit in the dark living room for a long time, staring at the empty wall, listening to the clock tick louder than it should. I whisper, "What did I see today? What did I really see?" My voice sounds broken in the silence. I shake my head and say, "No, it can't be that." I keep repeating, "There must be another explanation." The apartment feels suffocatingly quiet. Every minute drags like it refuses to end. I whisper, "Think, Daniel, think." When I finally hear the door unlock, I sit upright and force a calm breath. Emily walks in, drops her bag and exhales heavily. She says, "The hospital was crazy today." I waited forever. I watch her closely and ask softly, "Are you okay?" She nods fast. "Yes, just tired." I pause and ask, "Did the doctor say everything is fine?" She looks at me and smiles too quickly. "Yes, Daniel. Everything is fine." I whisper inside, "That smile is a mask." We sit for dinner later. Forks scrape plates in uncomfortable silence. I say, "You've been distant lately." She replies, "Just work stress." I ask, "More than usual?" She says, "Yes." I nod and think, another lie I can't hold. Her phone lies face down again. I ask, "Who keeps texting you so late?" She answers, "Colleagues." I ask, "At midnight?" She pauses. "Different time zones." I laugh softly. Convenient. Inside I think, she didn't even hesitate. I say, "Since when do you care about the gym?" She smiles, "I want to stay fit." I say, "You never cared before." She replies, "People change." I whisper, "Or they get better at hiding." Dinner ends. That night, I lie beside her pretending to sleep. I hear her move. I hear the balcony door open. I wait. Then I quietly follow. I stop near the door. She whispers, "I miss you too." My heart drops. I whisper, "Who are you talking to?" No answer. I step back. I think, it's Ryan Brooks. The next morning I open my laptop. I whisper, "Please don't show me anything." But I see charges. Hotels. Restaurants. Transfers. I whisper, "No, this can't be real." I search the name. Ryan Brooks, I say. My hands shake. I whisper, "How long?" 6 months. 8 months. Almost a year. I sit down and whisper, "A whole year." Something inside me breaks. I whisper, "All that time I trusted you?" That night I open an old photo album. Emily sleeps beside me. I whisper, "We used to laugh like this." I turn pages. "Remember this day?" I ask. She doesn't respond. I whisper, "You said forever." A tear falls. I whisper, "Did you ever mean it?" Silence answers me. I close the album. I hold it tightly. I whisper, "Why wasn't I enough?" I add, "Tell me the truth, was I ever enough?" She stirs slightly but says nothing. I whisper, "I gave you everything I had." My voice cracks. I whisper, "And you gave your heart to someone else." I wipe my face quickly. I whisper, "Was I just a mistake to you?" No answer comes. Only her breathing fills the room. I whisper, "I still loved you, even now." I press my forehead against the album. I whisper, "But I don't know how to anymore." And I cry silently in the dark. I whisper, "I wish I could go back and stop myself from trusting so easily." I sit in silence and say, "But it's too late now." I hold the album tighter and whisper, "Everything I loved is slipping away from me." I sit there alone, knowing nothing will change now. I remember college days with Emily. We were poor but deeply in love. I told her we would survive anything. I worked 2 jobs every day. I said, "I will take care of you." She replied, "I believe in you, Daniel." I gave up my dreams for her future. I whispered, "It is all for you." Now I sit alone thinking about it. I say, "Where did I lose myself?" I feel like I became only her shadow. I remember she smiled when I struggled. I told her, "We will make it." She said, "Don't ever leave me." I promised, "Never." I think, I kept that promise. I whisper, "But she didn't." I say, "I built everything for her." I ask myself, was it worth it? I answer, "I thought so." Now I realize I lost myself. Late night I call Sophia. She says, "You sound broken." I say, "I think I am." She asks, "What happened?" I whisper, "Emily." She says, "You still love her, don't you?" I say, "Yes, but it hurts." I whisper, "That's the problem." I search Ryan Brooks online. I find he is wealthy and charming. I say, "Of course he is." I read he manipulates married women. I whisper, "So this is not new." I find message, "Emily defended me earlier." I say, "She defended me?" I feel hope return briefly. I whisper, "Maybe she still cared." Then I find hotel photos. Dated 3 days ago. I whisper, "No." Hope dies again. I say, "It never stopped." I decide I won't beg for love anymore. I remember her laughing in the rain. I say, "She used to be my world." I whisper, "What changed?" I think, or maybe I changed. I say, "No, she did." I sit in silence. I whisper, "I miss who I was." I say, "Before all this." I tell Sophia everything. She says, "You need truth, not memories." I say, "Truth is killing me." She replies, "Love already did." I whisper, "Maybe you're right." I feel broken inside. I say, "I can't fix this." She says, "Then stop trying." I think, stop loving? I whisper, is that even possible? I sit with my head down. I say, I built my life wrong. I whisper, for someone who left. I feel anger rising. I say, I deserve answers. I whisper, but I will never get them. I close my laptop. I say, enough searching. I walk to the window. I whisper, look at what I became. I see my reflection. I say, I don't recognize him. I whisper, he looks empty. I think, that is me now. I sit again. I whisper, I am done begging. I say, never again. I feel something hardening inside me. I whisper, this ends now. I breathe deeply. I say, I won't chase what destroys me. I whisper, even if I still love her. I remember her smile again. I say, it used to feel real. I whisper, now it feels like a lie. I think, everything changed. I say, or I finally saw it. I feel tired. I whisper, I need peace. I say, not her. I think, not anymore. I walk away from the window. I whisper, I am done waiting. I sit in darkness again. I say, this is my turning point. I whisper, no more pain like this. I feel clarity forming. I say, I choose myself now. I whisper, finally. I think, this is the end of me begging. I close my eyes. I whisper, goodbye to who I was. I say, I am not that man anymore. I feel strength rising. I whisper, I will rebuild. I say, without her. I think, finally free. I whisper, even if it hurts. I sit quietly. I say, I won't beg for love anymore. I remember her voice again. I whisper, it used to calm me. I say, now it cuts me. I think, that is truth. I sit still. I whisper, I will survive this. I say, even alone. I feel tears again. I whisper, but I won't break again. I think, I already did. I stand up slowly. I whisper, no more waiting for truth. I say, I already saw it. I breathe out. I whisper, this is my end, and my beginning. I look at the empty room. I whisper, everything changed here. I say, nothing will be the same. I feel calm sadness. I whisper, I accept it now. I say, finally. I remember Emily again. I whisper, I loved you truly. I say, but love is not enough. I think, it never was. I feel final release. I whisper, goodbye to us. I say, I am done. I sit quietly again. I whisper, I will not look back. I say, no matter what I feel. I close my eyes one last time. I whisper, I am free now. I say, even if it hurts. I breathe slowly. I whisper, I won't beg for love anymore. I say, I am done with the past and ready to live without her holding my heart anymore. Finally I move forward. I wake up on my birthday expecting at least a text from Emily, but my phone is silent today. Feels strange already. I whisper, Emily didn't even remember me. I sit on the edge of the bed staring at the wall saying, maybe she's busy, but I don't believe it anymore. My phone lights up, but it's not her, it's Sophia. She says, birthday dinner tonight, you're not staying home? I reply, I don't feel like celebrating. She says, stop it Daniel, come with me. I sigh, fine. I say quietly. I leave the apartment. And think, Emily forgot again. Sophia drives me to the restaurant and says, you need air? I reply, I need answers. She glances at me and says, you already know them. I stay silent staring out the window thinking about Emily laughing somewhere without me. We arrive at the restaurant. She says, eat something. I say, maybe later. She rolls her eyes, always later with you. I don't answer. I walk inside feeling empty inside. I see her sitting in a corner booth with Ryan Brooks laughing like nothing matters. My heart drops. She is wearing the necklace I bought her for our anniversary. I whisper, no way. Ryan looks up first and smirks. He says, well, Emily freezes. I say, Emily. Silence hits. She stands quickly and says, Daniel, I can explain. I say calmly, for once tell me the truth instead. She looks shaken. She says, it's not what you think. I laugh. Really? Tension rises. She says, you were never there for me. Emotionally, I whisper, I worked for you. She says, Ryan made me feel alive again. That hits me hard. I whisper, alive? Ryan stands and says, if she was happy with you she wouldn't be here. I clench my fist. I say, stay out of this. He smirks. Truth hurts. I breathe heavily. I say, I gave her everything. Emily cries, but it wasn't enough. I step back. I say, so this is it. Silence. I turn away. I whisper, happy birthday to me. I walk out fast. Rain starts outside. I think, don't cry, but tears come. Anyway, I say, not here. I drive home shaking, I whisper, it's over. I arrive home, I say, you chose him. I place papers on table, I whisper, divorce. Door opens, Emily walks in, she says, Daniel please. I say, read it. She freezes, I whisper, I won't beg anymore. She cries, I say, happy birthday to me indeed. I sit down, she says, please listen. I say, I did listen for years. She whispers, I was lost. I reply, so you found him. Silence. She says, it wasn't planned. I laugh bitterly, I say, a year isn't planned. She cries harder. I stand, I say, I missed my own life for you. She says, I never asked you to. That hurts more. I whisper, I know. I look at her, I say, do you love him? She hesitates, I say, answer me. She whispers, I don't know. I nod slowly, I say, that's enough. I pick up pen, I sign paper, I say, this is done. She says, Daniel wait. I stop at door, I say, I already did wait. She cries, please. I shake head, I whisper, I deserve better. I open door, rain again. I step out, I say, no more. I walk away. She calls my name, I don't turn. I whisper, I am done loving you. I keep walking, street is empty. I say, finally. I breathe deep, I whisper, I'm free now. I stop for a moment, I say, this hurts but it's truth. I look at sky, I whisper, I survived you. I walk again, I say, no turning back. I feel lighter, I whisper, goodbye Emily. I stop again, I say, for everything. I close eyes, I whisper, I choose me. I breathe, I say, no more pain from you. I walk forward, I whisper, this is my ending and beginning. I look ahead, I say, I will rebuild myself. I whisper, without you. I keep moving, I say, no more waiting. I breathe slowly, I whisper, I am done begging for love. I look back once, I say, never again. I whisper, I finally let go of everything that broke me forever. Now I move. I wake up in a quiet apartment that no longer feels like home. I sit up and whisper, so this is how it ends? The silence answers me. I check my phone, no message from Emily. I say, still nothing, and I laugh softly. Emily starts coming and going like a storm. She calls me one night saying, Daniel, we need to talk. I reply, about what exactly? She says, you know what you did to us. I close my eyes and whisper, us. She says, you changed, you stopped trying. I answer, I stopped surviving alone. She goes silent, then says, you're blaming me now. I say, no, I'm telling the truth. She whispers, I miss you sometimes. I pause and say, sometimes isn't love. She hangs up. Another day she comes to my door crying, saying, please don't do this. I ask, do what? She says, leave me like this. I reply, you already left first. She shakes her head, Ryan isn't what you think. I say, he never was. She says, I was confused. I whisper, for a year. She cries harder, I didn't mean to hurt you. I say, but you did. She touches my hand, we can fix this. I pull back and say, no we can't. She switches after that anger now. She says, you made me unhappy too. I ask, by loving you too much. She says, by being distant. I laugh and say, I worked for us. She replies, I needed emotion, not responsibility. I whisper, I gave everything I had. She says, it wasn't enough. I nod slowly and say, then nothing ever would be. I move into a smaller apartment. The first night feels like drowning in silence. I whisper, this is what freedom feels like, but it hurts. I stop eating properly. I sit at work staring at nothing. My coworker says, you okay, Daniel? I reply, I'm fine, but I'm not. Sophia shows up one evening saying, you look like a ghost. I say, I feel like one. She replies, then start living again. I say, how? She says, therapy. Start there. I laugh, I'm not broken. She says, you are exhausted. I stay quiet. She forces me to go to a therapy session. I sit there and say, I don't know who I am without her. The therapist asks, what did you lose? I say, myself. Sophia says, you can get him back. I whisper, he doesn't exist anymore. The therapist replies, he does, you just buried him. Slowly I start changing. I pick up my old camera. I whisper, I used to love this. Sophia says, then use it. I start writing again. I say, I forgot I could think for myself. She replies, you always could, you just didn't. Emily starts falling apart too. I hear from mutual friends she fights with Ryan. She calls me late one night saying, he doesn't care about me. I say, you chose him. She says, I thought it was love. I reply, it was escape. She goes silent, then whispers, I miss stability. I say, you called it boring. Another call. She says, he stopped answering me. I ask, why are you telling me this? She says, because I have no one else. I pause and say, that's not my responsibility anymore. She whispers, I lost everything. I answer, I did too. Ryan disappears from her emotionally. She says, he's always busy now. I say, that's who he is. She whispers, I ruined everything. I reply, you made choices. She says, I want to come back. I stay quiet, then say, not to me. One morning I sit alone at my desk. I open a drawer and see my wedding ring. I stare at it and whisper, this was my whole life once. I take it out. My hand shakes. I say, I can't carry you anymore. I place it inside the drawer gently. I whisper, goodbye. No anger, just silence. I close it. Sophia watches and says, "You okay?" I nod and say, "I think so." She smiles. That's progress. Weeks pass. I go outside early morning. I lift my camera and whisper, "I haven't seen the world in a long time." I take a photo of the sunrise light breaking over the horizon. I look at the picture and for the first time in months I smile naturally. I whisper, "I'm still here." Sophia says behind me, "Told you." I laugh softly and say, "Yeah, maybe you did." I hold the camera tighter and say, "I don't need her to see beauty anymore." I look at the sky and whisper, "I can see it myself now." I sit in my apartment watching my phone light up with news alerts. I whisper, "Ryan Brooks exposed again?" I open the article and read the headline about financial fraud, manipulated investments and fake returns. I say under my breath, "So that's who he really was." I scroll further and see comments, people calling him a scammer, women sharing stories of emotional manipulation. I whisper, "He wasn't just lying to me." I lean back and say, "He was doing this everywhere." My phone keeps vibrating. Emily's name flashes again and again. I whisper, "She's still trying." I don't answer. I say, "I can't do this right now." Sophia calls me and says, "You saw it, didn't you?" I reply, "Yeah, it's everywhere." She says, "The internet is tearing him apart." I whisper, "Karma finally found him," she says, "or he found it himself." She continues, "Emily's getting dragged into it too." I ask, "How?" She says, "People are linking her name with his scams, emotional affair, everything." I whisper, "She chose that connection." Sophia says, "She's alone now." I answer, "She made her choices." Days pass. Emily keeps calling. I ignore every message she sends. "Please talk to me. I need you." "Daniel, I'm sorry." I whisper, "You needed me before too, and still left me alone." I sit at night staring at the ceiling. I whisper, "Funny how silence feels louder now." My phone rings again, unknown number. I almost ignore it, but I answer. It's her voice, breaking immediately. She says, "Daniel, please don't hang up." I stay quiet. She says, "Everything is falling apart around me." I ask, "And you think I can hold it together for you?" She says, "I don't know what else to do." I whisper, "That's what I felt too." I end the call. More news breaks. Ryan is officially investigated. Company's frozen accounts. I whisper, "It's all coming down now." Sophia says, "He's finished." I answer, "Not just him." She says, "Emily has no one left." I say, "She had me once." She replies, "And lost you." I whisper, "She lost herself first." One night I hear knocking at my door. I open it and see her soaked completely, rain dripping from her hair, her face pale and exhausted. She says, "Please just listen." I step aside without speaking. She walks in slowly, shivering. She says, "I made the biggest mistake of my life." I look at her and say, "I know." She cries, "Everything is gone now." I whisper, "It goes fast when it finally goes." She says, "Ryan used me too. I didn't see it." I answer, "You saw what you wanted." She shakes her head. "I was confused." I say, "For a year, Emily." She whispers, "I'm sorry." I reply, "Sorry doesn't change anything." She says, "I didn't mean to lose you." I say, "You lost me every time you chose lies over truth." She steps closer. "I miss us." I pause and whisper, "There was an us once." She says, "We can fix it now." I shake my head, "You didn't destroy it in one moment." I continue, "You destroyed it every time you came home and looked me in the eyes and pretended everything was fine." She starts crying harder. "I was scared to tell you." I whisper, "So was I, of losing you." She says, "I wish I could go back." Silence fills the room, only rain outside. I look at her for a long moment, memories rising but fading just as fast. I finally say, "So do I." I sit across from Emily in the quiet apartment and I say softly, "Why are you still here?" She looks at me and whispers, "Because I need you to understand." I reply, "Understand what exactly?" She lowers her eyes and says, "I never planned to leave you permanently." I freeze and ask, "Then what was all of this?" She says, "It was never meant to be this serious." I whisper, "You destroyed everything anyway." She shakes her head quickly. "I thought I could balance both lives." I ask, "Both lives?" She says, "You and Ryan." I lean back and whisper, "So I was the safe option." She says, "You were stability." I feel my chest tighten and I say, "Stability is what you call love now?" She replies, "Ryan made me feel alive." I whisper, "And I made you feel safe." She nods slowly, "Yes." I stare at her and say, "So I was your foundation while he was your escape?" She whispers, "I didn't see it like that." I ask, "Then how did you see it?" She hesitates and says, "I thought I could have both." I whisper, "You can't divide a heart like that." She starts crying and says, "I didn't want to lose either of you." I reply, "But you did." She whispers, "I know now." I sit forward and say, "Tell me the truth, Emily, why him?" She closes her eyes and says, "He made me feel wanted every second." I ask, "And I didn't?" She shakes her head. "You did, but differently." I whisper, "Differently is not less." She says, "Your love was stable, predictable, safe." I reply, "And his?" She says, "Exciting, dangerous, addictive." I lean back and whisper, So you got addicted? She nods slowly. Yes. I say, and marriage became boring for you? She whispers. I didn't mean for it to happen, I answer. But it did. She looks at me and says, I kept thinking I could control it. I whisper, control two people at once. She says, I was wrong. Silence fills the room. I ask, when did it start feeling wrong? She pauses and says, when I realized I missed you even while I was with him. I whisper, so you had both and still felt empty? She nods, crying. Yes. I say quietly, that's not love, Emily, that's confusion. She whispers, I was selfish. I see it now. I reply, selfishness destroys, quietly, not loudly. She looks down and says, Ryan stopped caring eventually. I ask, what do you mean? She says, he only wanted the excitement, not me. I whisper, so when the thrill ended, so did his interest. She nods. Yes. I say, and I was still here the whole time. She whispers, I know. I feel something inside me loosen and I say, do you understand what you took from me? She cries harder, I lost everything too. I shake my head and say, no, you lost chaos, I lost peace. She whispers, I never wanted to hurt you. I reply, intentions don't erase damage. Silence falls again. I look at her and say, I loved you fully, Emily, there was never anyone else for me. She whispers, I know. I continue, but love without honesty is just survival. She lowers her head and says, I don't deserve you. I answer, no, you just don't know how to love someone without losing yourself. I sit back and feel the final weight lifting. I whisper, I can't keep waiting for you to become someone else. She says, I wish I could change it. I reply, so do I. I stand and walk to the table where the papers are. I say, this is the end now. She looks up, Daniel, please. I pick up the pen and say, I'm not angry anymore, Emily just finished. She whispers, do you hate me? I pause and say, no, I don't have space for that anymore. I sign the divorce papers slowly, carefully. I whisper, this is peace, not victory. She watches me and says, what happens now? I answer, we both learn to live with what we did. I place the pen down and say, goodbye, Emily. She cries quietly, goodbye, Daniel. I walk to the door and stop for a second. I whisper, I hope you find what you were looking for. She says, and you? I look back and say, I already am. I step out into the quiet air and close the door behind me. Not heavy, not light, just final. Months pass and I feel life slowly shifting under my feet. I sit at my desk and my manager says, Daniel, we're promoting you. I blink and say, me? He smiles, your work speaks for itself. I whisper, I didn't think I still had anything to offer. Sophia laughs when I tell her. I say, I got promoted today. She replies, about time. I ask, why do you sound like you expected it? She says, because I did. I shake my head and say, I almost didn't show up to work half the time. She says, but you did. I start posting my photography online. One night I hesitate and say, no one will care. Sophia replies, post it anyway. I do it. I whisper, this is stupid. A week later comments appear, this feels emotional. Who took this? It feels like pain and hope at once. I stare at my screen and say, they see it. I whisper, I didn't even mean to show them that. Sophia says, that's the point, you stopped hiding. One morning I wake up and sit still. I don't think of Emily. First I freeze and whisper, I didn't think of her. I sit there longer and say, why does that feel strange? Sophia says, over coffee, you survived something that could have destroyed you. I reply, I don't feel like I survived, it feels like I just disappeared from it. She says, that's healing, not disappearance. I nod slowly and say, I used to wake up and feel like I lost everything every day. She replies, and now? I whisper, now I wake up and just breathe. Emily still appears in my life through fragments, unknown numbers, messages never sent. I see texts like, I hope you're okay, and I shouldn't be texting you. I say softly, then don't. I don't reply anymore, I just let them sit there. One evening I meet someone unexpected. I am at a cafe and a woman sits near me. She says, Daniel Carter. I look up and say, yes. She smiles sadly, I'm Nina Brooks. I pause and say, Ryan's ex-wife. She nods and says, I didn't expect to meet you like this. I ask, why did you want to? She says, because you're not the only one he broke. I lean back and say, tell me. She takes a breath and says, he always needed attention, always needed control. I whisper, I thought it was just me. She shakes her head, no. He repeats patterns. I ask, patterns? She says, emotional manipulation, making people feel special, then replacing them. I sit silent and say, so I wasn't crazy? She replies, no, you were just next. That hits differently. I whisper, I blamed myself for so long. She says, that's what people like him do. I feel something loosen inside me. I say, I thought if I had been better she wouldn't have left. Nina says, she left because he offered illusion, not because you lacked anything. I look down and whisper, illusion? She says, yes, excitement, not reality. For the first time I don't defend Emily, I just listen. Later I walk home slowly thinking I say under my breath, I wasn't the problem alone. Sophia notices my silence and says, you look lighter. I reply, I think I stopped carrying something I didn't own. She smiles good. Nights become easier. I start sleeping without waking up thinking I lost something. I whisper, this is new. One morning I decide to go somewhere different. I drive alone and reach the ocean. The sunrise is just breaking over the water. I stand still and say, I haven't been here in years. Wind hits my face. I whisper, I used to think my life ended back then. I take my camera out and Sophia's words echo, you survived. I raise it and say, maybe I did. I capture the horizon light spilling across water. I look at the photo and whisper, it's still beautiful even after everything. I stand there longer, breathing deeper, and say quietly, healing isn't forgetting, it's learning to exist without the weight. I close my eyes and whisper, I'm still here. For the first time I don't feel like I'm rebuilding someone. I feel like I am finally becoming someone new. A year later I find myself standing outside the same coffee shop where everything broke inside me. I whisper, funny how life brings you back where you ended. I step inside and I see her. Emily is sitting alone at a corner table. She looks different, quieter, tired, like someone who stopped running. I whisper, so this is what silence does to a person. She looks up and her eyes widen slightly. She says softly, Daniel. I nod and say, I didn't expect to see you here. She gestures to the seat and says, do you want to sit? I pause and say, for a little. I sit across from her and the air feels heavy but not painful anymore. She says, it's strange seeing you again. I reply, yeah it is. She looks down and says, you look different. I say, you too. A silence passes, then she whispers, I didn't think I'd ever get the chance to say this properly. I ask, say what? She takes a breath and says, I lost you and I finally understand what that means. I nod slowly and say, it took time. She whispers, I thought I had control over everything. I reply, we both know that wasn't true. She looks at me and says, I was selfish. I see it now. I answer, we all see things too late sometimes. Her voice shakes as she says, nobody ever loved me the way you did. I look away and whisper, I loved you so much I forgot how to love myself. She closes her eyes and says, that's what I ruined, isn't it? I say, not just ruined, you lost it piece by piece. She grips her cup and says, I keep thinking about what I did every day. I reply, you should, but not to punish yourself, to understand it. She nods slowly, I understand it now. I lean back and say, what matters is what you do with that understanding. She whispers, I don't know how to fix any of it. I say, you don't fix the past, you just don't repeat it. Her eyes fill with tears as she says, I miss us. I answer, there was an us but it changed before we noticed. She looks at me and asks, do you hate me? I stay quiet for a moment and say, no. She exhales like she was holding her breath for years. I continue, but I'll never be the man who waits for you again. Her lips tremble and she whispers, I understand. I stand up slowly. She says, Daniel. I pause. She asks softly, are you happy now? I think for a moment and say, I'm learning how to be. She nods and whispers, I hope you get there fully. I reply, so do I. She doesn't stop me as I turn away. I hear her crying quietly behind me, but I don't turn back. I walk toward the door and feel something unfamiliar calm. Outside the sunlight hits my face warm and steady. I whisper, no more rain. I step out and breathe deeply and say quietly, this is what letting go feels like. For the first time I don't carry the past with me, I just walk forward into the light. I stand quietly, say, I never thought I would feel this calm. Sophia says, you earned it slowly. I reply, slowly is the only way that works. I walk along shore, say, every step feels like mine. I whisper, no more borrowed life. Sophia says, that sounds powerful. I say, it feels honest. I sit, say, I used to fear being alone. I continue, now I understand clarity. Sophia says, you see things differently. I nod, say, yes I finally do. I breathe, say, I am not waiting to be saved. Sophia says, you became your answer. I whisper, truth I avoided. I stand, say, I forgive what hurt me. Sophia says, including yourself. I reply, especially myself. I look horizon, say, I am ready, live fully. She broke my heart the day I saw her holding another man's hand. But losing her also forced me to find the person I had lost long before that moment. Myself.